This brujeria story is crazy. So this girl says that this happened to her family a few years ago when they lived in Mexico. They now live in the United States. She says that when they lived in Mexico, her dad was a teacher and so were her two other uncles. She explains how her dad grew up with like a very strict father who was like, you go to school, you're gonna become a teacher and you're gonna have a career. However, her dad never really wanted to be a teacher. He only did it because he didn't want to disappoint his father. His father basically his whole life told them that if he wasn't a teacher, like you were basically nothing, you have no career. Her father's real dream was to be a chef. He really loved cooking. Because of all of the conversations that her dad and her mom had about him having this dream of being a chef and, you know, being a teacher but not really loving it, her mom encouraged him to quit his job as being a teacher and become a chef. He felt so supported by his wife that he actually quits his teaching job and decides to open up like a little food stand right outside their home. So after dad quits his teaching job and opens up this food stand, anytime there's like family gatherings, they all noticed that her two uncles would make fun of her dad in a joking manner, but like it was really tough to hear. Her dad was the youngest of the three boys, and every time the other two would see him, they'd be like, oh, here comes the guy who went to school to sell hamburgers. Or they would say things like, oh, look at the guy who went to school to sell food out of his house. She explains how the two brothers and their wives would just laugh after joking around like that. She does, however, say that her grandmother, which is her father's mom, would back him up and tell them to be quiet because well, how are they making fun of somebody who's following their dreams? Anyway, time would go on and his food stand was actually successful. Through word of mouth, people started showing up. There'd be lines around his house and they all fell in love with the salsas that he was making. His food was that amazing that he couldn't sell out of his house anymore. He ended up leasing a building and making a restaurant and hiring people, and his restaurant was successful. So after, you know, successful restaurant, when they would have family gatherings, the brothers would no longer say anything to the dad. However, his mom, the girl's grandma, would now be the one instigating because she's like, oh guys, why are you so quiet? You're not gonna say anything to the guy who went to school to sell burgers? I mean, he's making more money than you guys. Love that for him. I love But she wouldn't end there. She would go as far as to say, oh, you're not gonna say anything to the guy who's buying his wife all these beautiful clothes and bags that you guys can't afford for your wives. Obviously, the grandmother was defending her son because of all the times that they gave him shit. And she says that the uncles would laugh along with her, but you knew on the inside that they were fucking hurting by everything she was saying. Anyway, his restaurant was so successful that he ended up opening a second restaurant in that town. So they would continue to go to family gatherings, and she said that she would notice how she would see both of her uncles talking to each other, whispering with each other, and then when they would see her dad, they would completely change their demeanor. They'd be like, oh, hey, come in, come eat. Like they were being a little fake to her. Like whatever she was noticing, there was something off. She also said that the grandmother was not stopping. Like at any moment that she had, she would talk shit to them, and to the point where she knew that this was affecting them. So after everything, there was a point in time where her dad started getting really ill. She said it started off as a cough. He started feeling really bad. He did end up taking like medicine and it would control it for a little bit, but then it would come again and he would have these like cough attacks, like really bad, to the point where he was starting to cough up blood. Everything started changing. His employees also started to get really sick. A lot of them started quitting just out of nowhere. The restaurants were not selling as much as they used to anymore. It came to the point where the dad didn't want to do this, but he had to fire some people just in order to make sure he had the money to pay the people who were there and the lease. Obviously, the dad had hopes that maybe this was just a rough patch. He understood business. He knew that there was always going to be a point where maybe it was going to slow down, but he never expected to have to fire someone or like people from his place. Even though their hopes were like, okay, we're gonna do better next month. The next month would come and it was not successful. The month after that would come and everything was going downhill. Unfortunately, they had to close down that second restaurant to even keep the first one afloat. She also explained that her dad never felt better. Like he never healed, and he had lost so much weight that he looked just completely different. So there was one day where her mom's friend goes to the restaurant, sees her dad, and tells her mom, hey, I don't mean to offend you. I don't know if you believe in this. As I'm looking at your husband, I think that someone's doing this to him. She explained to her mom that she feels like she needs to take him to someone because this doesn't seem normal. The mom actually listened and they took him to a curandera. I think it's like a healer, like somebody who can cleanse people. Before her dad and mom could say anything to this lady. The lady looks at her dad and says, "Come here, sit down. Why do you have problems with your brothers?" Mind you, she had no idea who this man was. And that was the first thing that she says when she sees him. The dad responds like, "Oh no, I don't have any problems with my brothers. I get along with them very well." The lady was not backing down. She's like, you have problems with your brothers. She starts doing like the card readings, and she tells him that they are doing brujeria on him. She said in that moment her dad started crying. That's how sad he was, because he would have never thought that his own family would do something like that to him. In that very moment, the dad agreed to, have himself cleansed by this lady. And mind you, it doesn't take one session. He has to go to her several times, and each time they would clean him with the egg, and the egg would become clearer and clearer as the sessions would go on. She says that this work went so quick that after the few of those sessions, the business was booming again. His health was coming back to him. Like, it was crazy, and it was just confirmation that, yeah, indeed his brothers did that brujeria to him. She explains that while, they took the brujeria away, the business was booming. Her dad, her family doesn't know how to feel about what happened next. So the two brothers, the ones that did the brujeria, they both had their wives pregnant at the time. One of the women, in the moment that she's giving birth, has complications. The baby passes away, and so does she. The other brother's wife has the baby, but then she gets cancer. Something obviously really sad, it's bad, but the lady, the one that was doing the cleanse, had already told her father something was gonna happen to them. She told him, "Your brothers are gonna suffer." And she told her dad, "Not because of you, and I don't want you to blame yourself. It's a consequence of what they attempted to do." Obviously, she says her dad understood that, this was just a consequence of what they did, but he also felt terrible because that's still his brothers, that's still his family. However, dad, he decided to not be close to the family anymore, and that is why they moved to the United States. He decided to move away because this was something that just marked him intensely. I cannot imagine ever feeling that way towards my siblings. Like, that's fucking insane. Can you imagine having that much hate in your heart where like you cannot be happy for your siblings, your blood, like your family? That's crazy. I think the worst part about it is like how the dad felt bad, even though they obviously didn't give a fuck if he ended up dying because of this. Could never be me, because like what in the world? But what do you guys think?